Welcome to the Nirvah podcast. And on the second episode, we have Sangeeta Motwani. Sangeeta, can you tell us about your childhood in Oman and how that influenced you and your passion for agriculture and the food supply chain?
Yeah, well, childhood always brings happy memories. So I think, growing up in Oman was very different. It's very different from the Western world that we're used to here in Canada. I think Oman, comes with its restrictions because it's a Middle Eastern country. But I think, I grew up as a disciplined kid, in an Indian family. So you've got to do something, you've got to become something, right? So I think, the idea of either becoming an expert in something was where the idea stemmed from, or was instilled into us as kids from parents. You've got to be good at something. I found myself in prairies when in my early 20s, and prairies is filled with agriculture, oil and gas. So I think with a plant background, that was the obvious choice for me to make, is to get into the egg industry. And yeah, that's how I find myself working with agriculture companies.
Okay, that's awesome. And you studied biotechnology and then you did research in breast cancer. And how did that transition over to work related to the food supply chain?
Yeah, long story, and I'll spare you the details. But at the end of the day, my main goal was to be a research scientist. It was my dream job when I graduated from Northumbria University in Newcastle, England. And excuse me, and my goal was to change the world with GMO hybrid, because it sounded really interesting. I had very little knowledge on how that um, affects the human health and how people respond to it. But it just sounded so innovative, and it sounded the way the food chain, or the food supply needs to go, is how to make sure that we can all be well fed at the end of the day. So that's what really excited me about the GMO world. I found myself applying for a lot of research projects at the time at University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. And I found myself at breast cancer research. Now, that's not what I really wanted to do, but also to understand where how women react when they have certain proteins in them, and how do the proteins really react with breast cancer. Are they helping the breast cancer reduce inflammation, or are they actually the cause of breast cancer? So that was basically what my research was on. Um, After 2 months of working 6 in the morning till 11 p.m., I couldn't do it anymore. I found myself that I'm an extrovert, um, and wanted to interact with people. I wanted to meet more people. I wanted to chat more than work. And the lab was not where I belonged, even though that was my dream goal. So I worked with a couple of recruiters and found myself the first job in egg industry.
Right. And based on what you've seen, what is the link to the modern day supply chain and some of these diseases that we see that are quite prevalent in us humans?
Yeah, I think the supply chain, you know, it really matters where your food is coming from. And food safety is very, very essential to most of us. And as we dig deeper, we learn a lot of foods that are processed, over processed, and ultra processed. I think the closer you are to the source of the food, I think that's where you're trying to stay true to the environment. And um, and it's easy for your body to process. I am no nutritionist, but I do understand that the simple you keep it, the better it is for you. The more processed it is, your body has never been used to those chemicals or that ultra processed food when you were growing up. So I think, the simple you keep it, the better it is.
Right. And in the modern day climate, if you're like a middle class family, you don't have a ton of cash, how do you achieve this? How do you get closer to that source? Being in Calgary, for instance.
Yeah, it's very the change has been in very significant lately with the inflation, and the prices have gone up quite drastically in Canada. And I think, someone who does well, and, coming from even, upper middle class family, I think it's been very challenging to make the ends meet and eat the same source of food and go to the same grocery store. I think it's about being creative. When you're out buying bags of salad, maybe you can buy some loose salad and put your salad together. Or, instead of buying a cup of fruit, maybe buy fruits, individually, and make your own fruit salad. I think it is avoiding a lot of processed items off your list and trying to keep it simple and being innovative with recipes. I think that's the best way to do it. Instead of buying salad dressings, make your own, have olive oil, lemon juice, whatever that may look like. I think it's about, again, keeping it very simple and stupid, so that you are avoiding these extra charges, and also trying to get your daily nutrients.
Ton of sense. Yeah, I'd really want to live on a farm one day. That's what I'm trying to figure out how to get there. Seems like it's not that accessible. You see a good amount of people on Instagram and such. They're doing off-grid living, communal living as well, and I feel like that's really good for young children even. And it's a trend that I'd like to see and be a part of. But yeah, we'll see. What about you? What are your thoughts on that in terms of like living on a farm?
Oh, I'm a city girl through and through. But at the end of the day, I've worked with a lot of farmers across North America. And I think, to your point about, having accessible farm produce, I think the trend is, in going in that direction. Calgary recently allowed that you're able to have, poultry in the city, and have certain number of hens, and have your own eggs for that matter. So I think, being so close to farmers when COVID hit, there was not a lot of produce in the grocery stores. We all remember how, excessive purchases were going on, especially toilet paper and meat and diapers and baby food. So I think, I think being reactive wasn't the case, and I had to think this through. How am I going to, make past these few or weeks or months? And instead of stocking up, I decided to reach out to farmers and say, hey, I'm looking for some eggs, or, for myself and for my family, and some meat for myself and for my family. So, that was one of the experiments, for that matter, that initiated reaching out to farmers. Um, and even today, I prefer to bring my fruits and eggs from the farmers market, even though it's a little expensive, and trying to manage the cost. But I think it all comes down to, if you're trying to stay as close to the source and keep it clean, you're avoiding a lot of big, ticket to the hospital, really. Trying to reduce your inflammation, your diseases, your gut issues, your, mental health, for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super useful, I think, for people to realize because supply chain is so advanced. There's such a huge gap between those who produce the food and grow it and harvest it. Because now we can just like swipe across an app a few times and the food magically appears at our doorstep. Right. The only step that's actually missing is somebody walking in with that food and feeding it to you. Besides that, everything else happens, and people don't realize is that there are so many steps that need to be taken. But I think that trend is, like you said, it's going the other way as well, where some people are moving and setting up their own farms, and
Yeah.
it's nice to see for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And with your time at Cargill, so you started off, you were still in a lab setting in Cargill, and then it's when you transitioned over. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so Cargill started off with a lab assistant role. Again, I thought that was my dream job. I was always very excited to take on new roles and learn different aspects of agriculture business. And a year later, I found myself, okay, again, I want to talk to more people. I want to be on a farm. I want to learn what an agronomist does. And I had tons of conversations with farmers that dropped off their canola seed sample at the canola crush plant, and found myself really intrigued about how canola is harvested, grown, and what goes on out there in the fields. Because as consumers, we are very oblivious and not aware of how the food is grown and how the food arrives at our table. Like you said, we are very much in a bubble of going to the food store, putting things in our basket, and coming home and cooking. But we have never really realized how much efforts go in. And I wanted to get close to the source. And I found myself looking at jobs, and there was an opening at Egg Horizons in close to Calgary, a town close to Calgary, at that location. And yeah, I found myself working with Egg Horizons, working with the reps, and on a daily basis interacting with farmers, asking them questions. Very intrigued, coming from, India and living in Middle East, studying in England, and then making my way to the prairies. It was definitely um, culture shock, but also very exciting to understand what farmers do in the prairies, and particularly in Alberta, and how they grow canola, how they grow wheat. Why is canola seed not stored and wheat seed can be stored over a year? So understanding those intricacies and contracts and the whole politics behind agriculture industry. Yeah.
Right. It's awesome. And I guess Cargill is one of the, if not the biggest player in the food supply chain, you could say globally. Must have been quite interesting seeing their entire operation, no?
Yeah, so Cargill at one point was one of the biggest was the biggest private firm in the world. Um, yeah,
In
you're
general,
right. Yeah,
just private
yeah,
firm in general. Okay, that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Crazy to believe in. You're just another employee. And yeah, it was interesting working with so many departments and how all come together to make this happen.
And transitioning over to OPI, what was your experience there like? What was it? How was it different to that of Cargill?
Oh yeah, no, great, great change, huge change. Working with Cargill as a big company to moving on to a small startup, um, and also moving from crop inputs world to an equipment world. Very, very different. I absolutely enjoyed the experience. I think Cargill is a great place for someone that's recently graduated, someone that's wanting to be in a setting where things are laid out, processes are laid out, uh, and all you do is follow them and execute your daily tasks. Um, I soon realized I didn't fit in that box. I wanted to be creative with my approach. I wanted to throw everything on the wall and see what sticks. I wanted to think outside the box and wanted to come up with creative solutions, try different techniques and methods to execute a business. And I found myself looking for a job, and I was very glad a recruiter reached out to me. And I was hired at OP in 2014, 15, I believe. And I worked there a couple years. I extensively traveled the prairies. When I say extensively, I mean I travel 6 to 7 days a week for 3 to 4 months.
Really? Okay, that's a lot. But that must have been nice in a way to see everything pretty much. I mean, is there a
Yeah.
place that you haven't seen in the prairies at this point?
I've seen all of Alberta from Peace Region to down to the border, states border. I've seen all of Saskatchewan, north to south. I've seen all of Manitoba, small towns, and I absolutely enjoyed the experience. And what OP was trying to achieve was really word of mouth marketing, center of influence marketing, reach out to farmers and spread the word with their flagship product. And as much as I like to chat, I was the right person for it. And I love traveling as well. So it just fit the bill. And yeah, until it got too old. And then I needed a change again.
Right. That sounds cool though. Like being able to travel, I think not too many people have traveled those areas specifically.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the first time I've heard somebody extensively traveling like the prairies, but those are experiences I think that you need in life. Those travel experiences, like you learn so much by meeting
Yeah.
all those different people.
I agree. I mean, being on a farm, understanding what they do in the morning, what they do in the afternoon, what does the night look like, how farmers are so humble and yet achieve this impossible task of making sure that they have yield, put food on their table, and get the right money for their product, all in a few months that Canada really provides. It's a very short window, so I think they're really hardworking people, and I think everyone needs to at least experience that once in a lifetime for sure.
And what does a winter look like for your average Canadian farmer? What are they up to?
Yeah, so I always get asked. Farmers basically don't do anything in winters, or they can chill. Actually, that's not true. When I worked at Farmers Business Network, I think winter was definitely the busiest time of the year for us. By that, I mean you sit down with them, you create crop plans. What are they planning to grow? What are their plans to change? What are the challenges that they had? So I think it's time to reflect on their previous crop year and plan, better, if not the same, um, the plan for the following year, and work with companies out there that are offering deals on crop inputs, fertilizer, seed, the grain marketing programs. They attend sessions to learn all of that, and really work on fixing their equipment if they've had any hiccups in the past season. Maybe look to purchase a new equipment, maybe look to purchase a new land, or maybe look to rent out their land. I think a lot of housekeeping and admin work is what takes over their winter season.
That's very interesting. Because even in Sri Lanka, the farmers have this off period where they'll grow their stuff, they'll harvest it. Till it grows, they take a little bit of time off, but once they've harvested, they take some time to themselves and they chill and relax. And there is that embedded in our culture as well, where you see a lot of people who are unwilling to work year round. And Sri
Mhm.
Lankans take any excuse to have a holiday. So when there's a full moon, there's a holiday over here. Anything. When the Hindus are celebrating something, everybody takes a day off. When the Muslims are doing it, everybody takes a day off, which is great in a way. But setting up a business in Sri Lanka becomes a bit of a challenge when you really need that many days off. But
Yeah, that's
that's
right.
cool though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. In terms of working at Farmers Business Network. What has that been like? And could you describe a bit about what they do for farmers as a company?
Yeah, FBN has they go with the model of of calling themselves as a disruptor. When FBN entered the Canadian market, I was technically the first hired employee, second employee that started. Um, and The world was my oyster. By world, I mean Alberta. And I was asked to network with farmers, spread the word about what FBN is planning to do in Canada and how they've been changing things and this e-commerce platform in states. FBN came with their mission of being farmers first, which they very much are. They brought price transparency to farmers, knowing what everyone's paying for crop inputs in their area anonymously. They also are an e-commerce platform for crop inputs, so you're able to purchase your crop inputs, whether that's chemicals or seed, through an e-commerce platform. Very easy to transact, and they have great marketing programs. Um, Great sessions for communities to sit down and understand what FBN is trying to do, achieve, and what does a future look like. I think what FBN achieved immensely is bringing farmers together under one roof. I guess physically as well. They organize these big conventions in Nebraska every year, and so that farmers can interact, learn from one another, attend sessions, meet the team, and really celebrate the season that they've had of a difficult harvest or a difficult growing season, and exchange ideas, exchange experiences. So I think FBN has done a lot for farmers to just bring the price transparency, to the ease of purchasing crop inputs, to also looking at what your fields look like while you're out somewhere, to understand if there are issues in the field. Um, and at the end of the day, I look at it as farmers can't really control what the rain will do or the weather will do, or how the land price is changing, the fuel costs, the equipment costs. One thing that they can really control with FBN was what their input would cost. And so taking control and understanding how much you're paying for crop inputs. And are you at a disadvantage because someone in your area is a bigger farmer? And again, that's a very respective term, because if you farm 5,000 acres, there's someone else that's farming 6,000, and there's someone that's farming 10,000, and so on and so forth. So I think really having that competitive advantage to understand that whether you buy 1 liter of chemical or 1,000 liter of chemical, your price stays the same. So they level the playing field for small farmers. But again, when I say small farmers, it is very much a respective term, because there could be someone that's 100,000 and you farm 50,000, which is really big farmer, in my opinion. But I think it's really coming down to saving on crop inputs and controlling the costs, on your farm.
Right. And you did talk about creating a sense of community by organizing some of those events, which I think is amazing. And do you see, or rather, what do you see as the state of farmers' mental health when it comes to Canada and the prairies? Because in Sri Lanka, that's a huge struggle where a lot of them are going through a lot of different things in their minds, and there's quite a bit of farmer suicide as well. They have access to little to no resources or help when it comes to that. What is that situation like over there in Canada?
Yeah, I think I've met a lot of farmers in in my past experiences, and I think with FBN and with OP, you meet a myriad of farmers, those that come from you know um, multiple generations of farming, and those that have just taken over land from the neighbors and want to farm, and only a few generations in. So I think the experience across the board is different. The sentiments are different as well. Um, and For the longest time, northern Alberta struggled with moisture. And I met a couple of farmers that said, "Hey, it's great that FBN's doing such great things, but we actually might not be farming tomorrow." And it's interesting because there are farms in southern Alberta that weren't getting a lot of rain, and then there are farmers in northern Alberta that were getting way too much rain, so they got flooded in a lot of scenarios. So I think it's really just it just really comes down to um, how much you want to pursue that. And a lot of farmers know where they stand because they have to put food on the table. And if they know that they can possibly do that, they definitely rent the land out or they sell it and move on to working in ag industry, whether that's working with a company or as an equipment rep or a sales rep, or joining the board of Canadian Wheat Board or Canola Board. So I think in Alberta specifically, I can speak for farmers know where they stand and how they want to pursue their next steps, and what they think will be sustainable for their farm. Um, I think they also are sort of um, feel the guilt of not being able to continue the farming that their fathers and grandfathers were doing for generations. And I think that um, they do have that self check-in with themselves, is to understand, if this is not sustainable, we should let go of the guilt and still be in egg industry, teach their generations, their younger generations, about farming. And maybe they can rent a piece of land somewhere else that they can still be involved in a little bit of farming, so that they don't lose the culture for that matter.
Right, that's a very different approach, and so it's interesting. There's a lot to learn from that side as well, and implement in countries like Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
But yeah, with your work, you eventually transitioned over to working on the supply chain and procurement. So what was
Mhm.
that like, and what are some of the issues you see in the supply chain procurement space when it comes to the attachment and involvement?
Yeah, I think some of the facts that I've learned, or that really rose to the interest in procurement and supply chain for me was, in 1960, farmers were feeding about 25 people. And in 2020, a farmer feeds about 155 people. And this number is only going to grow because we're expecting a 26% increase in population by 2050. So that would be around 9.7 billion. Um, and I think if we are not creating a sustainable um, agriculture, and understanding really the food chain and understanding the source of food, and crop inputs, I think we are going to be at a disadvantage and not being able to leverage the opportunities North America has for that matter. So, not only making sure the food safety is taken care of, but also getting close to the source of chemicals, fertilizers, seed, and equipment. And, in the procurement world, I realized that, especially with COVID, I mean, so did we all. I mean, we realized that if the logistics was disrupted, how are we getting food? The stores were um, em- or with empty shelves. We had no food in the stores. We had no food on the table. How are we going to change that when we are hit by another pandemic? And that really piqued my interest in understanding how we can change that, which led to really the manufacturing in-house of chemicals with FBN. We wanted to not only take control of our costs, but also the dependency on importing all these chemicals. Um, and it led to manufacturing in-house in US, Canada, and Australia. And I was involved knee deep in the Australian market, and trying to change the way FBN was doing business, buying fully finished product to manufacturing within the country.
Right. And in terms of the farmer's sales process, once they've harvested their crops, they're trying to sell it. what type of technology or procurement techniques are they using? Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, I can definitely paint the picture a little bit on that. When farmers are harvesting, they work through, Cargills of the world to market their grain. Unless if it's a specialty grain, then they are reaching out to brokers in the market. That could be for hemp, that could be for, a specialty canola. So I think in that case, they're reaching out to different companies and making sure they have contract in place. And I think that's very important, in my opinion, because if you have a contract in place that you were going to sell to this company, then you know that you can put in all your efforts, time, and money into growing that crop, because growing hemp takes a lot of moisture and a lot of time, and it has a longer growing season. And again, we all know, we all love hemp hearts, and we understand that it's very expensive, and it's sold by pound as opposed to by bushels, which canola, malt, barley and wheat is sold at. So trying to make sure the contracts in place and reaching out to brokers, working with grain marketing specialists, and again, I can definitely sort of touch on, a lot of companies are wanting to get into the blockchain, to track where the food is coming from. So farmers are slowly adopting that idea as well, where this crop is grown in field A, and this is then harvested and unloaded into grain A, and then a trucker comes to pick it up and then transports it from all the way from south to north or north to south, and that particular grain then gets processed in this factory and then reaches the shelf at Walmart. So I think trying to trace where your food is coming from and trying to make sure that this food is going to get processed in this particular factory, I think that's where the world is wanting to go, again with the food safety, again with the dependency on understanding where your food's coming from. And again, I think talking about the nutrition, like we talked in the beginning, to understand what kind of food you're really eating, is very important to younger generations.
Right. That's awesome. And in terms of tech savviness, I guess you could say, out of the multitude of farmers you've seen and interacted with, what is that like? Are they willing and able to access and use various pieces of technology that'll help implement certain systems that you just spoke of?
Yeah, so I always categorize my audience as, in egg industry, as early adopters and laggers. So you will always find there are few early adopters, obviously, and there are laggers that will take time to get there. Um, there, so you want to work with early adopters because they also tend to be a center of influence in the area, in the region. You work with one farmer that loves technology, different types of equipment, and different types of grain monitoring systems for that matter. They use smartphones and smart tablets. So I think working with one of those, um, you know, members in the audience, you're able to create awareness in that region, and you slowly see how that trend basically spreads in that area. And there are farmers that initially probably are skeptical, but then they soon tend to adopt that method.
Right. And then your current role at Farmers Edge, how is
Mhm.
that different from everything, like all the work you've done up to this point? What does that entail that excites you?
Yeah. So I had tons of experience with FBN, tons of experience with OP, and great experience at Cargill too. I think what Farmers Edge is really about for me is trying to build this marketplace and e-commerce platform for them from my past experiences and my 10 years of experience in the egg industry, on how those business relationships are forged, and you work with the big retails and the big companies in within your region, and also trying to leverage the relationships, and the understanding of what they require and what we can provide with a solution is what Farmers Edge marketplace is going to be all about. So again, from my experiences, I'm trying to put all my experiences, the good, the bad, and the worst, to see how I can shape this model for Farmers Edge. I think in a lot of ways, Edge is different, but in a lot of ways, it is similar. The company has been out there for a while. There is a name in the market. It is in a lot of countries as well. And they've done really good things with Farm Command. I will, however, be working on the commodity egg side. And it's a complete different business and model that they're wanting to launch. And it's going to be a great experience working with a great team.
Awesome. So you've worked in a ton of different companies, from like really big companies to startups. You've traveled to all of these different farms, and through all these different experiences, have you seen a lot of other people that look like you?
I think when you meet so many people, you try and definitely find similar synergies. But I think, coming from a very motivated background myself with my parents and my family, and wanting to change the world, and run the world for that matter, and being self-driven, I think you do find that in some people. And you meet more people along the way, and there are those that will really support you. And I've had such great mentors in my life. I'm very, very thankful, from my team at Cargill to my team at FBN and OB. I've had great experiences that have shaped my career that is today. You definitely meet similar people. You definitely meet women in agriculture as well that are very much driven. And I think, there's only one thing I'd like to say to those people, is that believe in yourself and just lift others. If you have been successful, help others to be successful as well.
Awesome. And what do you have any suggestions to increase the diversity in this sector when it comes to North America? Is there anything based on your experiences that you think should be implemented, after which there will be more people willing to come into this sector and pour in heart and soul, make things nice?
Yeah, I think if you are a driven person, and wanting to achieve your goals, specifically in egg industry, I think one should not be demotivated with being a male dominated industry, um, and really just believing in yourself, focus on your goals, work with great mentors, find those great mentors. And if that's going to be in your university or in your neighborhood, stick to that mentor, work with them, and also explain to them what you're looking for and how they can mentor you. If you find that in your team, definitely work closely with them. FBN had a great program of mentor and mentee, and I was unfortunately not be able to be part of it. They had so many applications, and they definitely helped those that needed more help than I did, I guess. Um, but I think it's very much to just believe in yourself, focus on your goals, and as much as I like to, not say this, but definitely develop a thick skin.
Awesome. Really good message. And to wrap things up, what are your thoughts on the future of digitalization in agriculture, and how can it improve the efficiency, transparency, and sustainability of the entire food supply chain?
Um, yeah, I think it starts with knowledge. If you are unaware of how the agriculture is shaping its way of doing things, and it's getting a facelift, I'd like to say, then it definitely starts with knowledge. And I think the economy needs to move into the knowledge and innovation economy. Um, when I say that, it's again talking about how the population is growing, how there are so many people still in the world that are still don't have a lot of food, and how to grow and make sure we're efficient. By that, I mean we can use less fertilizers and still find a way to grow the yield. And or have a higher yield, use less crop inputs and still maintain the yield without losing any yields to diseases and insects. By that, I also mean making sure that we can maintain and manage the grain in our bins without losing any yield. With the temperature fluctuations in prairies, you tend to lose a lot of grain if you are monitoring the temperature and moisture in the bin. So I think if you aren't able to get your eyes onto your field and your grain yields, equipment, it's going to be a lot of manual work, and there are lots of apps and there are lots of companies out there that are promoting on how you can make your life easier, and maybe focus on also looking at maybe renting more land and trying to increase your acres, or trying to support a local community, or trying to support or work at another agriculture company. So I think if we are able to manage our time and efforts, I think that is achievable to feed 9.7 billion people in 2050.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
appreciate this.